This leather sandal is over 5,000 years old. It looks like it could still be worn today. That is the quiet miracle of ancient tanning, a craft so vital it shaped the very march of civilization. By the end of this journey, you will know the 25 ingenious and frankly bizarre recipes humanity used to turn rotting skin into enduring art. We are going to meet the original alchemists who worked not with lead and gold, but with brains and bark, smoke and dung. How did a Roman emperor build a fortune on collected urine? And why would a samurai trust his life to leather fermented in rice bran? The answers lie in a shadowy world of chemistry and sheer survival instinct. What does the resilience of a simple leather bag tell you about the people who made it? The first method on our list is also one of the most primal and ingenious. It requires no special tools, no imported chemicals, just the animal itself. This is brain tanning. For countless generations, from the plains of North America to the steppes of Asia, hunter-gatherers perfected this remarkable form of alchemy. The principle was beautifully circular. To preserve the hide of a deer or an elk, you used its own brain. The brain matter, rich in natural oils and a substance called lecithin, was mashed into a paste with warm water. This creamy emulsion was then worked thoroughly into every fiber of the scraped and cleaned hide. The science, though unknown to its practitioners for millennia, is straightforward. The emulsified oils from the brain penetrate the skin's fibers, coating them and preventing them from sticking together as they dry. This process, called lubrication, is what creates that famously soft, almost cloth-like leather known as buckskin. But the work was not done yet. The brain-tanned hide was then smoked over a slow, cool fire. The smoke introduced tannins and other preservatives that made the leather water resistant and resistant to bacterial decay. This final step turned a soft hide into a durable material perfect for clothing, bags, and shelter. For nomadic peoples, the efficiency was perfect. Every part of the animal was used, with the brain providing the very key to preserving its skin. It was a closed-loop system of survival, turning a perishable resource into a lasting one with nothing wasted. The resulting leather was not just functional, it was incredibly supple, silent in motion, and could be washed and re-softened repeatedly. Imagine the skill, passed from parent to child, of transforming something so fragile into something so enduring, using only what the land provided. That final step over the smoky fire was not just an afterthought. Smoke tanning stands on its own as one of the oldest and most transformative preservation methods ever devised. While it perfectly complemented brain tanning, it was also a powerful technique in its own right, capable of turning a raw hide into a durable, weatherproof material. The process was a patient, sensory ritual. A cleaned hide would be carefully stretched over a conical frame or within a simple, enclosed pit. Beneath it, a fire was built not for heat but for smoke. The fuel was the secret. It was not dry, crackling timber, but carefully selected rotten wood, often from hardwoods like oak or hickory. This rotten wood smoldered for days, producing a thick, cool, chemical-laden smoke without generating damaging flames. For the tanner, this was a waiting game, a vigil of constant adjustment to ensure the smoke enveloped the hide evenly for as long as a week. The magic happened on a molecular level. That dense smoke was packed with natural chemicals, primarily creosote and other phenolic compounds. As these particles drifted through the leather's fibers, they bonded with the collagen proteins. This chemical marriage did three remarkable things. First, it acted as a powerful preservative, making the leather highly resistant to the bacteria and fungi that caused decay. Second, it created a water-resistant barrier, causing water to bead up and roll off the surface. And third, it repelled insects, protecting the leather from moths and beetles. The visual signature of this process is that rich, warm amber to deep brown color, a hue that became synonymous with durability. The leather also took on a distinctive, pleasant smell, a scent of earth and wood that lasted for years. The applications were as practical as the process. Smoke-tanned leather became the material of choice for plains tribes making their portable tipi covers, for woodsmen crafting watertight bags and containers, and for clothing that needed to withstand the elements. It was technology born from careful observation, a way to borrow the preserving power of the forest itself and lock it into skin. The smoke from those ancient fires gave leather a profound resilience, but it was a different substance, drawn not from the air but from the earth, that would build empires. Deep in the forests of medieval Europe, tanners discovered a slower, more deliberate form of alchemy. This was vegetable tanning, and its king was the mighty oak. Imagine a series of deep, stone-lined pits dug into the ground, a landscape of earthy trenches. The process began with the most humble of ingredients, crushed oak bark gathered by the cartload. A tanner would place a cleaned hide at the bottom of a pit and cover it completely with a thick layer of this coarse, fragrant bark. Then came another hide, then another layer of bark, building a towering, organic sandwich that might contain dozens of skins. Finally, the entire stack was flooded with water and left, not for days or weeks, but for an entire year, sometimes even longer. It was an exercise in monumental patience. What was happening in that quiet, murky pit? The oak bark was slowly releasing its powerful magic, a class of chemicals called tannins, specifically tannic acid. These tannins seeped into the hide and performed a microscopic miracle. They formed strong, stable bonds with the long, twisted strands of collagen protein that make up the skin's structure. Think of it like this: the collagen fibers are a tangled pile of loose threads. The tannins act as a permanent, all-natural glue, linking those threads together into a tight, interlocked network. This cross-linking is what transforms a floppy, perishable hide into a firm, stiff, and incredibly durable material. The leather that emerged from these pits was a world apart from the soft, pliable buckskin of the hunter-gatherers. It was thick, heavy, and had a distinctive pale brown color. It could be molded under pressure and would hold its shape perfectly when dry, a property known as temper. This made it the ultimate material for objects that demanded unwavering strength. The saddles of knights and the rigid cuirasses of foot soldiers were fashioned from vegetable-tanned leather. So too were the covers of priceless manuscripts, the soles of boots, and the straps for heavy machinery. The trade had a cost, however. The process of soaking and fermenting produced a smell so notoriously foul that by law, tanneries were always banished to the downstream edge of a town, their pungent odor carried away from polite society. This was not the craft of a solitary hunter, but an industry, a noisy, messy, vital cornerstone of medieval life that turned the strength of the forest into the literal backbone of civilization. While the oak bark pits of Europe produced leather fit for armor and saddles, a different tradition flourished under the Mediterranean sun. Here, tanners sought not just strength but a delicate beauty. Their secret was sumac, specifically the leaves and twigs of the Rus coriaria shrub. This was vegetable tanning refined to an art form. The process was similar in principle to the oak method, but the material was far more gentle. Crushed sumac leaves were steeped in water to create a tanning liquor, but the baths were often shallower and the soaking times shorter. The tannins from sumac are less aggressive than those from oak. They penetrate the hide more evenly and create a finer, tighter grain. The result was a leather that was remarkably light in weight, supremely flexible, and possessed of a soft, almost silky surface. It had a pale, elegant color, often a warm cream or light tan, that served as a perfect canvas for further decoration. This was not the leather of the battlefield or the workshop floor. This was the leather of luxury and scholarship. Sumac-tanned hides were meticulously crafted into the finest gloves for nobility, delicate yet durable clothing, and most famously, the exquisite covers for sacred and literary manuscripts. The soft, pliable leather could be tooled with intricate gold patterns, dyed vibrant colors, and molded to protect priceless vellum pages for centuries. The demand for this superior material fueled its own economy. Sumac grew abundantly in the hills of Sicily, across Greece, and throughout the Levant. It became a valuable commodity, shipped along bustling trade routes to workshops from Cordoba to Constantinople. The presence of a sumac tan book binding in a medieval library was a statement of both wealth and reverence, a testament to a craft that prized subtlety as much as strength. And this ancient knowledge never truly vanished. In a few specialized workshops, particularly in the Middle East and North Africa, artisans still use sumac tanning for high-end bookbinding and restoration, preserving a tactile link to a world where the value of an object was measured in its grace as much as its grit. The contrast is striking. One continent built its world on the stout leather of the oak, while another clothed its culture in the refined skin tanned by sumac. But for all its beauty, sumac-tanned leather still shared a fundamental trait with its oak-tanned cousin, a trait born from those organic tannins. It was a true leather, its fibers permanently altered through a chemical marriage. Yet there existed another path entirely, a method that produced a material of startling whiteness and a delicate, almost chalky softness. This was not tanning, it was tawing. The distinction is crucial. Tanning, using plant tannins or smoke, creates irreversible bonds within the skin, making it durable and somewhat water-resistant. Tawing, however, is a more temporary affair. It relies on mineral salts, most famously alum, to preserve the hide. The process was a recipe of strange ingredients. A cleaned skin would be soaked in a bath of water, crushed alum, and common salt. Often, binders like egg yolk or wheat flour were added to the mix, giving the solution a viscous, almost custard-like consistency. The alum, a crystalline salt, penetrated the skin's fibers and coated them, preventing decay and making the hide pliable, but it did not create those permanent cross-links. The result was a leather that was brilliantly white, incredibly soft to the touch, and could be worked to a fine, thin sheet. You could almost mistake it for a fine parchment or a delicate cloth. This whiteness made it a symbol of purity and status. In ancient Egypt, tawed leather was used for the finest garments, for decorative elements on furniture found in tombs, and for the straps of sandals worn by the elite. In Greece and Rome, it was the material of choice for the most expensive gloves, for the pages of luxurious books known as vellum, and for the ceremonial robes of priests and officials. The pristine condition of white leather items discovered in dry Egyptian tombs, still soft and bright after thousands of years, is a testament to the effectiveness of this mineral preservation. But this beauty came with a profound vulnerability. Because the alum only coated the fibers rather than bonding them, tawed leather had a critical flaw. It was highly sensitive to water. If it got wet, the alum would wash out, leaving the hide stiff, brittle, and prone to rotting. A sudden rainstorm could ruin a priceless ceremonial garment. This fragility meant tawed leather lived a sheltered life, a luxury item reserved for indoor use, for ritual, and for display. It was the leather of the palace, the temple, and the library, never meant for the mud of the road or the sweat of a battlefield. That pristine white leather was a treasure, but it could not survive a downpour. Humanity craved a material that combined beauty with true resilience, a leather for the real world. The answer, it turns out, was waiting in the ground for millennia. Chrome tanning is the invisible backbone of the modern leather industry, responsible for over 90% of the leather we use today, from supple car seats to durable work boots. Its story is taught as a triumph of 19th century industrial chemistry, but a discovery in the dry earth of China has rewritten the first chapter entirely. Archaeologists working at a 4,000-year-old site unearthed pieces of leather with a peculiar blue-green tint. Laboratory analysis revealed the shocking truth: the leather contained chromium. Somehow, these ancient artisans had stumbled upon the very chemical process that defines modern tanning. centuries before the concept of chromium even existed. How is this possible? The leading theory points to the environment itself. The ancient tanners may have used water from streams running through mineral-rich soils, or perhaps they burned specific plants whose ashes contained trace amounts of chromium salts. They would have soaked their hides in these waters or mixed the ashes into their tanning pits, completely unaware of the powerful metallic agent they were introducing. The process was almost certainly accidental, a happy byproduct of local resources, but the result was revolutionary. Chromium salts work with breathtaking speed and efficiency compared to vegetable tannins. Where an oak bark tan took a year, chromium can do its work in a single day. It creates a leather that is incredibly soft, highly water-resistant, and possesses a distinctive, slightly warm feel. And it gives the leather that signature pale blue hue, often called wet blue in the industry before it is dyed. The mystery is not how they did it, but why this knowledge vanished. This proto-chrome tanning method appears as a brilliant flash in the archaeological record, and then disappears for thousands of years, completely forgotten. The technique was lost, perhaps because the community that discovered it moved on, or because their unique local resource was depleted. It would not be rediscovered until the 1850s, when chemists, armed with modern laboratories, systematically unlocked the power of chromium salts and industrialized the process. To hold a piece of that 4,000-year-old Chinese leather is to touch a ghost of a future that never was, a glimpse of a modern material born in the ancient world, only to slip back into the earth, waiting for science to find it again. While chrome tanning offered a glimpse of a lost future, another method harnessed the very essence of life to create a leather of impossible softness. This is oil tanning, the ancient art of making chamois. The process begins not with a pit or a smokehouse, but with the strong, unmistakable scent of fish oil. Traditionally, tanners used oils pressed from the livers of cod or other fatty fish. A hide, meticulously scraped and cleaned of all flesh and fat, would be laid out. Then the laborious work began. The tanner would slowly, methodically pound and work the thick, pungent fish oil deep into every pore of the dry, stiff hide. This was not a quick soak, it was a physical infusion, a massage that could last for hours until the skin could absorb no more. The saturated hide, now dark and greasy, was then hung in a warm, ventilated room for the true magic to happen. Over days or weeks, the oil underwent a crucial chemical change. It oxidized. Exposed to the air, the oil molecules began to link together, forming long polymer chains. These newly formed polymers wove themselves around the collagen fibers of the hide, creating a flexible, durable network. Think of it like a microscopic net of cured oil holding the skin's structure in a permanent, pliable embrace. Finally, the hide was washed, often with a mild alkaline solution like soapwort or wood ash lye, to remove any excess unreacted oil. What emerged from this wash was a material that defied its origins. It was breathtakingly soft, almost like a dense, buttery cloth. It could be wrung out when wet and would spring back to its original shape. Most remarkably, it was incredibly absorbent, capable of holding many times its weight in water without feeling soaked. This unique combination of properties made chamois leather invaluable for centuries. Knights used its gentle, non-abrasive texture to polish their steel armor to a brilliant shine. Vintners employed it as a filter to clarify wine and beer. Its superb absorbency made it the ultimate drying towel for glass, ceramics, and even the human body, prized in bathhouses across Europe. The name itself is a story of mistaken identity. This leather was never actually made from the skin of the agile alpine chamois goat, whose hide is too thin and fragile for such work. The finished product was simply so soft and luxurious that it was named after the animal famed for its supple grace. From a stiff, fishy hide to a cloth of unparalleled tenderness, oil tanning represents a different kind of alchemy, one that turned liquid fat into a lasting, tactile wonder. The delicate chamois required a gentle touch, but the next method on our list was anything but subtle. Dung tanning stands as a testament to human pragmatism in its rawest form, a process where necessity truly was the mother of invention, no matter how pungent the result. From the bustling cities of ancient India to the outskirts of medieval European towns, tanners turned to the most abundant resource available: animal waste. Cow dung, dog dung, and even pigeon droppings were collected in vast quantities. The process began with the raw, salted hides, stiff and covered in lingering bits of flesh and hair. These were not placed in clean water, but submerged in large, open pits filled with a thick, fermenting slurry of dung and water. The hides would soak in this bath for weeks, sometimes months, in a slow, bacterial transformation. The science, though revolting to consider, is remarkably clever. Fresh dung is teeming with active bacteria and potent enzymes. As the mixture fermented, these biological agents went to work. They acted as a natural, powerful dehairing and fleshing solution, literally digesting the residual tissue and loosening the hair follicles so they could be scraped away with far less manual labor. But the dung did more than just clean. It also introduced mild tanning agents from the digested plant matter within the animal waste, beginning the preservation process. For a tanner, the advantages were overwhelming. The materials were free and endlessly renewable. It drastically reduced the strenuous physical work of scraping each hide by hand. This was efficiency born from sheer utility, a way to let nature's decomposers do the hardest part of the job. The social cost, however, was immense. The smell emanating from a dung tannery was legendary, a thick, pervasive miasma that could be detected for miles downwind. Historical records from medieval cities are very clear. Tanneries were always relegated to the lowest, downstream edge of town, their foul odors carried away from the homes of the wealthy and powerful. Tanners themselves occupied the lowest rungs of the social ladder, their trade considered unclean and dishonorable. Yet within that stinking, marginalized world, a vital craft thrived. The leather that emerged from the dung pits after thorough washing and further processing was surprisingly good, often used for sturdy straps, hard-wearing soles, and other utilitarian goods where appearance was secondary to strength. It reminds us that before chemistry was a science, it was a messy, olfactory art, and progress sometimes smelled very, very bad. The stench of the dung pits was a social curse, but another bodily waste product was so valuable it became a cornerstone of imperial finance. Human and animal urine, collected in vast quantities, was the secret chemical agent of the ancient tanning and textile industries. In cities like Rome, large ceramic jars called dolia were placed on street corners, inviting passers-by to contribute to a public resource. This was not waste disposal, it was a systematic harvest. The urine was left to stale for weeks, allowing bacteria to break down the urea into ammonia, creating a potent alkaline solution. For the tanner, this ammonia bath was a powerful tool. Soaking a raw, salted hide in it performed a crucial first step. The ammonia loosened the grip of hair follicles and helped break down residual flesh, making the laborious scraping process far easier. More than just a cleaner, the alkaline nature of the urine also helped to open up the skin's fibers and adjust its pH, preparing it to better receive the tanning agents that would follow, whether vegetable tannins or alum. But the use of urine extended far beyond the tannery walls. Next door, in establishments known as fulleries, workers would stand ankle-deep in tubs of aged urine, stomping on newly woven woolen cloth. The ammonia acted as a natural detergent and bleach, lifting grease and dirt from the fibers and giving the fabric a brighter, cleaner appearance. The economic value of this pungent liquid was so recognized that the Emperor Vespasian, facing an empty treasury after years of civil war, placed a tax on the urine collected from public latrines. When his son Titus complained about the unsavory nature of the tax, Vespasian famously held a coin from the first payment to his son's nose and asked if the money smelled offensive. The answer, of course, was that it did not. This pragmatic lesson gave us the phrase, pecunia non olet, money does not stink. The archaeological record bears this out, with the remains of large collection vats and drainage systems found near industrial quarters. So the next time you walk past an old public lavatory, remember that 2,000 years ago, its contents might have been considered a taxable commodity, funding legions and cleaning the very togas of the senators who debated its worth. The pragmatic value of urine was undeniable, but for leather that needed to survive the searing sun and shifting sands, tanners looked to a different kind of tree. Across the vast, dry landscapes of Africa and Australia, a family of hardy trees provided the perfect recipe for preservation. This is mimosa, also known as wattle, a type of acacia whose bark holds a remarkable concentration of powerful tannins. Indigenous peoples, from the San of the Kalahari to Aboriginal groups in the Australian outback, mastered its use. The process began with harvesting strips of the rough, fibrous bark from specific acacia species. This bark was then pounded or ground into a coarse powder and soaked in water to create a deeply astringent, reddish-brown tanning liquor. Hides, often from antelope or kangaroo, were submerged in this solution for an extended period. The high tannin content worked quickly and effectively in these hot climates, penetrating the hide to create a leather that was exceptionally firm, durable, and resistant to rot and insects. The advantages in an arid environment were profound. Mimosa tanned leather did not easily degrade under the relentless ultraviolet sun, and its natural resistance to moisture helped it withstand the rare but torrential downpours. This made it the ultimate material for objects essential to survival. Warriors fashioned large, robust shields from it, capable of deflecting spears. It was shaped into hardy sandals that protected feet from scorching ground and thorny underbrush. Most crucially, it was meticulously sewn into water bags and containers. The tannins themselves helped keep the water stored inside somewhat fresher for longer, a vital trait in lands where the next waterhole could be days away. The leather bore the signature of its source, a rich, warm red-brown hue that seemed to capture the color of the earth itself. This local knowledge would eventually circle the globe. In the 19th and 20th centuries, the extract of mimosa bark, standardized and marketed as wattle, became a major commodity in the global tanning industry. Its reliable, consistent tannins were perfect for producing a beautiful, mid-brown leather used in everything from high-end luggage and furniture upholstery to fine shoes. Today, when you see that classic reddish-brown leather on a sleek briefcase, you are looking at the direct descendant of an ancient technology born under a desert sun, a testament to how solutions forged in one of the world's harshest environments became a touchstone of modern craftsmanship. The warm red-brown of mimosa leather speaks of earth and sun, but in the quiet tea houses of ancient Asia, a subtler kind of alchemy may have been brewing. Could the same leaves that steeped a philosopher's drink also have tanned a craftsman's leather? The idea of tea tanning rests in a fascinating gray area between documented history and plausible experimentation. We have no grand archaeological finds of tea-tanned armor or saddles, but the chemical logic is compelling. Certain teas, especially heavily oxidized black teas or infusions made from tannin-rich oak galls or acorns, are packed with the very same plant compounds found in sumac and oak bark. In regions where large oak forests were not readily available, a resourceful artisan might have turned to what was on hand. The process would have been small-scale and intimate, perfect for a personal project. Imagine a tanner soaking a cleaned deerskin or a small piece of goat hide in a concentrated, cooled bath of strong black tea for weeks. The tannins would slowly migrate into the skin, binding with the collagen fibers to create a soft, lightly preserved leather. The result would be less about creating a rigid, heavy material and more about achieving a specific, beautiful effect. the leather would emerge imbued with the tea's natural dye, taking on a range of warm sepia tones from a pale parchment color to a deep, rich umber, depending on the strength and type of tea used. This blurs the line between tanning and dyeing, a reminder that in the ancient workshop, these processes were often one and the same, a single bath meant to both preserve and adorn. Modern leatherworkers, acting as experimental archaeologists, have successfully recreated this method, producing small items like bookmarks, pouches, or knife sheaths with a uniquely soft hand and a gentle, variegated color that commercial dyes cannot replicate. To place a piece of this tea-tanned leather beside one tanned with oak bark is to see the same principle through a different cultural lens, one where the ritual of the tea ceremony might have quietly extended its influence into the craft of the workshop, leaving behind a faint, aromatic trace of possibility. Tea's gentle stain hints at preservation, but in feudal Japan, tanners pursued strength through a process of deliberate decay. The method is called nawa-zuke, and it was dedicated to a single, vital purpose, the sacred armor of the samurai. This was not a craft of pits or smoke, but of fermentation, a slow, living transformation. The material was simple, long, narrow strips of rawhide, often from deer or cow. These strips were not soaked in a liquid but buried. They were packed tightly into large wooden tubs or ceramic jars, layered with a thick, dry, and pungent bed of rice bran known as nuka. The container was sealed and left not for days or weeks, but for many months, sometimes even an entire year. Inside that dark, airless space, a silent microbial feast began. The natural yeasts and bacteria present in the rice bran slowly consumed the starches and sugars, producing lactic acid and a host of other organic compounds. This acidic, fermenting environment acted upon the rawhide strips in a remarkable way. The lactic acid gently penetrated the fibers, tanning them and preventing rot, while the overall fermentation process broke down stiffness without sacrificing strength. The result, after the long wait, was a leather cord of astonishing character. When the tanner finally unearthed the strips, they were washed clean of the bran. What remained was a material that felt both incredibly tough and supremely supple. It could be pulled taut with tremendous force without snapping, yet it remained flexible enough to be threaded and knotted with precision. This unique combination of resilience and pliability made it the only material trusted for a samurai's life, the task of lacing together his armor. A suit of traditional samurai armor, or yoroi, is not a solid metal shell. It is a masterpiece of modular design comprised of hundreds of small, lacquered iron or leather plates called kazen. These individual plates are meticulously drilled with tiny holes and then laced together with miles of this specially tanned cord in patterns of stunning complexity and symbolic meaning. The lacing, called odoshi, does more than just hold the armor together. It allows the entire suit to flex and move with the warrior's body, absorbing the shock of a blade strike and distributing the force across many plates. The color of the lacing itself denoted rank, clan affiliation, and personal taste, creating a moving tapestry of identity on the battlefield. To see a restored suit of armor today is to witness the culmination of this forgotten tanning art. The leather cords, though centuries old, often retain their strength and color, a silent testament to the power of fermentation. Every tight knot, every cross-laced diamond pattern, represents a faith placed not in steel alone, but in the enduring strength of leather transformed by time, rice, and microbial life. The strength of a samurai's armor depended on a slow, hidden fermentation, but for a merchant crossing an ocean, the enemy was time itself. To transport a valuable cargo of hides across weeks of open sea, you needed a simpler, faster solution. This is salt curing, a method of preservation so fundamental it is the unsung hero of the entire leather trade. It is not true tanning, which chemically alters the hide structure. Instead, salt curing is a brilliant act of battlefield triage, a way to pause decay in its tracks. The principle is beautifully straightforward. bacteria, the agents of rot, require moisture to thrive. Salt is a powerful desiccant. By packing a raw, freshly flayed hide in dry salt or submerging it in a concentrated brine, the tanner creates an environment where bacteria simply cannot function. The salt draws the moisture out of the hide through osmosis, creating a hyper-salty barrier that dehydrates and kills microbes on contact. The hide, now heavy with salt, is essentially put into a state of suspended animation. It will not putrefy. It can be folded, stacked in the hold of a ship, and transported across vast distances from the hinterlands to the bustling tanneries of a distant port city. This method was the lifeblood of ancient maritime commerce. The Phoenicians, master traders of the Mediterranean, would have sourced hides from inland regions, cured them with precious salt on the coast, and shipped them to markets in Egypt, Greece, or Carthage. Centuries later, the Vikings followed the same logic, packing salt-cured reindeer and cattle hides into their longships as a durable, tradable commodity alongside furs and amber. Salt was not just a seasoning, it was a strategic resource mined from places like the ancient salt mines of Hallstatt in Austria, or evaporated from seawater along sunny coasts, its trade routes as vital as those for silk or spices. But this preservation came with clear limitations. A salt-cured hide is merely paused, not permanently transformed. If it gets wet, the salt washes out, and the clock on decay starts ticking again immediately. The curing process also leaves the hide stiff, board-like, and often heavily wrinkled. Before it could be tanned, it required a lengthy soaking and washing, known as rehydration and desalting, to restore its pliability. So while salt could save a hide from rot on a voyage from North Africa to Rome, it could not make it into a glove or a saddle. That crucial transformation still required the patient magic of vegetable tannins, alum, or oils. Salt curing was the essential first step in a global chain, the pause button that allowed the raw material of civilization to travel the world, waiting for an artisan's hand to begin the real work of alchemy. That salt-cured hide, stiff as a board, holds within its fibers a stubborn problem. The hair is still tightly rooted, and bits of flesh cling tenaciously to the underside. Before any true tanning could begin, this biological debris had to be removed, a task so difficult it demanded its own form of controlled chemical warfare. This is the ancient, indispensable art of the lime pit. Long before a hide ever saw a tanning liquor, it was often subjected to a long, transformative soak in a solution of slaked lime, known chemically as calcium hydroxide. The tanner would dig a series of deep pits, lining them with wood or stone to prevent leakage. Into these pits went the cured hides, submerged completely in water mixed with this fine white powder. Then the waiting began. For weeks, sometimes over a month, the hides would stew in this milky, caustic bath. The lime water is highly alkaline, and it works with a quiet, relentless efficiency. The key targets are proteins, specifically keratin in the hair and the collagenous tissue that anchors it. The alkaline environment causes these proteins to swell and break down, severing the chemical bonds that glue the hair to the hide and that hold the last scraps of flesh to the inner surface. It is a process of controlled decomposition where the tanner uses chemistry to do what would take days of brutal, manual scraping. After the long soak, the tanner would haul the heavy, reeking hides from the pit. The difference was dramatic. With a simple, curved knife or a blunt wooden blade, the hair and the top layer of epidermis could now be pushed off in great, satisfying sheets. The remaining flesh on the underside, now softened and gelatinous, could be scraped away with relative ease, revealing the clean, white corium layer beneath, the true leather waiting to be born. But this efficiency came at a terrible human cost. Lime is fiercely corrosive. Prolonged contact with the skin causes severe chemical burns, known as lime burns, which are painful, slow to heal, and prone to infection. Ancient tanners, working barefoot and with their arms submerged to the elbow in these pits, bore the marks of their trade as a matter of course. Their hands and forearms would become cracked, calloused, and scarred, a permanent testament to the sacrifice required by their craft. Over centuries, the process was refined for safety and speed. The basic principle, however, remained unchanged. Even in modern tanneries, a version of this liming process is often the first major chemical step, though now handled with protective gear and precise controls. It stands as a foundational, if harsh, chapter in the story, the necessary act of cleansing that made all the beautiful transformations that followed possible. The scars of the lime pit were a brutal necessity, but the forest offered a gentler, more integrated path. In the deep, shaded woodlands of North America, where the eastern hemlock stands tall and ancient, indigenous peoples perfected a method of bark tanning that was as much about harmony as it was about hide. The process began with a careful act of reciprocity. In spring or early summer, when the sap was running, a person would approach a mature hemlock tree. Using a stone or bone tool, they would make a vertical incision in the thick, furrowed bark, then skillfully peel away long, fibrous strips. This was not an act of felling, but of harvesting. When done correctly, by taking only a section of bark from one side of the tree, the hemlock could continue to grow and live for decades, its wound slowly healing over. The harvested bark, rich in a reddish-brown tannin, was then broken into pieces and pounded with a hammer stone to help release its potent chemicals. This prepared bark was layered into a sunken pit or a watertight dugout canoe lined with hides, creating the same organic sandwich used in European oak tanning. Deer, elk, or moose hides were submerged between the layers, and the whole assembly was weighted down with stones and filled with water. The tanning liquor that seeped from the hemlock bark was powerful, working over many months to produce a leather with distinct qualities. It was firm yet flexible, with a beautiful reddish-brown color that carried the very scent of the forest. This leather was the material of everyday and ceremonial life. It was meticulously sewn into soft-soled moccasins that allowed for silent movement through the undergrowth. It formed durable pouches for carrying tools, medicines, and sacred objects. Long, thin strips of this tanned hide became the vital bindings for securing stone axe heads to wooden handles or lashing together the frames of birchbark canoes. The sustainability of the practice was woven into its execution. By selectively harvesting bark and often using fallen trees, communities ensured the hemlock stands would remain for generations. This was a technology rooted in a profound understanding of place, where the tree gave its bark not in death, but as a gift to be answered with respect and care. The resulting leather was more than a material. It was a physical memory of the cool, damp hemlock forest and the skilled hands that transformed its essence into something both useful and enduring. The hemlock forest gave its bark as a gift, but in the humid groves of ancient India, a different tree offered its fruit for a more refined purpose. This is the myrobalan, a small, wrinkled nut from the Terminalia chebula tree, and it was the secret to some of the most exquisite leather ever made. Tanners would gather these dried fruits, which look almost like large peppercorns or small, hard dates, and grind them into a fine powder. This powder was then steeped in water to create a potent tanning liquor, but its magic was twofold. Myrobalan is uniquely rich not only in powerful tannins but also in natural oils. When a hide soaked in this bath, the tannins worked to bind and preserve the fibers, while the oils simultaneously lubricated them. The result was a leather that broke the usual trade-off. It was both strong and incredibly supple, with a soft, almost velvety surface that felt luxurious to the touch. It also took on a vibrant, warm color, ranging from a golden yellow to a deep, rich ochre straight from the nut itself. This beautiful, pliable material became the canvas for India's master leatherworkers. They tooled it with intricate floral and geometric patterns, stamped it with fine details, and gilded it with gold leaf. Myrobalan tanned leather was the preferred choice for binding some of the world's most sacred and scholarly texts. The soft covers protected delicate palm leaf manuscripts, while the natural oils in the leather helped to repel insects that might devour the pages. Its use was so esteemed that it is mentioned in ancient Sanskrit texts, not just as a craft, but within the context of Ayurveda, the traditional system of medicine. The myrobalan nut itself was, and still is, considered a powerful healing agent, used for its astringent and rejuvenating properties. This creates a fascinating bridge where a substance valued for purifying the body was also used to preserve and beautify animal skin, blending the realms of wellness and artistry into a single material. The demand for this superior leather and its key ingredient fueled a thriving trade. Bags of these precious, wrinkled nuts traveled along the Silk Road, carried by caravans from the forests of India to workshops in Persia and beyond. To hold a centuries-old book bound in this leather is to feel the legacy of that journey, a softness perfected in the ancient world, its color still glowing like a captured sunset. That golden leather from India was a treasure of trade, but the quest for a reliable tanning agent often led to the nearest riverbank. Willow bark tanning is a story of local ingenuity, where healers and tanners might have used the very same plant for different kinds of protection. The willow tree, with its long, slender leaves and flexible branches, was a familiar sight across the damp landscapes of northern Europe and the river valleys of North America. Its inner bark held a famous secret, salicylic acid, the natural compound from which aspirin is derived. While willow bark is not as densely packed with traditional tannins as oak or hemlock, it contains enough of these astringent compounds to perform a basic tanning job. The process was straightforward but labor-intensive. People would harvest strips of the grayish outer bark to reveal the greenish-white inner layer beneath. This inner bark was then chopped or pounded and added to a large pot of water, which was brought to a simmer over a fire. The boiling did two important things. It extracted the tannins and salicylic acid from the bark, creating a potent, tea-colored liquor, and the heat itself began to partially cook and stabilize the hide fibers. A cleaned deerskin or smaller hide would be submerged in this simmering brew for hours, slowly absorbing the preserving agents. The resulting leather was not the heavy, rigid product of an oak pit. It was lighter in color, often a pale tan or yellowish hue, and produced a leather that was serviceable and firm enough for everyday use. The potential secondary benefit is what makes this method particularly intriguing. Salicylic acid is a known anti-inflammatory and, crucially, a mild antibacterial agent. While the primary goal was preservation through tannins, the presence of this compound in the leather may have offered a subtle, additional layer of defense against the bacteria that cause decay and odor. This would have been especially valuable for items in constant contact with skin or the elements. Imagine a hunter-gatherer crafting a new pair of moccasins. By tanning the hide with a willow bark decoction, he was not only making the leather durable and pliable, but he might have been unknowingly giving those shoes a slight resistance to the bacteria fostered by moisture and sweat. This leather was the material of necessity, used for patching garments, making simple pouches, or crafting temporary bindings. In a survival situation where specific tanning materials were scarce, the ubiquitous willow tree provided a reliable, all-in-one solution. You could boil your medicine for a fever and your next pair of leggings in the same pot. A profound example of how ancient peoples saw the utility in a single plant extending far beyond a single purpose. The willow's gift was one of gentle, multifunctional strength, a whisper of chemistry in a world of immediate need. The willow's gentle chemistry worked with what was abundant on land, but for peoples of the frozen coasts, the most abundant material of all swam in the sea. Fish skin tanning is a masterclass in extreme resourcefulness, turning what many would see as slippery waste into a leather of astonishing toughness. For the Inuit of the Arctic, the Ainu of northern Japan, and coastal Scandinavians, every part of a catch was utilized. The skins of salmon, wolffish, cod, and even small shark were carefully saved. The process began immediately after the fish was cleaned. A skilled artisan, often a woman, would make a precise cut along the belly and then, with patient peeling motions, separate the entire skin from the flesh in one piece, much like removing a glove. These skins were small, often no larger than a placemat, and covered in tough, overlapping scales. The next step was to scrape them meticulously, removing every trace of fat and membrane to prevent rancidity. Then came the preservation. Methods varied by region. Some cultures would soak the skins in a tannin-rich brew made from alder bark or tea. Others employed a combination of oil rubbing and gentle chewing, a method where the tanner would soften the skin with her own saliva, which contains mild enzymes, before working in seal or fish oil. The real challenge was not the tanning but the assembly. A single salmon skin is not enough for a boot, so artisans developed a technique akin to quilting or building armor. They would sew many small, prepared fish skins together, overlapping the scales like shingles on a roof, using sinew thread and waterproof stitches. The direction of the scales was crucial, laid so that water would run off the garment instead of seeping in. The resulting material was nothing short of miraculous. Fish skin leather is naturally waterproof, windproof, and due to the dense cross-fiber structure of the skin, incredibly strong and cut-resistant. When tanned and smoked, it became pliable and durable. Inuit hunters wore boots and trousers made from salmon or wolffish skin, garments that kept them dry in freezing kayaks. The Ainu crafted stunning ceremonial robes called a tush, woven from cloth made of processed elm bark, but often decorated with intricate appliques of beautifully patterned salmon skin leather. In Scandinavia, fish skin was used for pouches and tough work gloves. To touch a historic piece of this leather is to feel a landscape. It is cool, dense, and carries the subtle shimmer of scales beneath the surface, a direct link to a world where survival meant seeing the potential for a rainproof coat in the silvery skin of yesterday's catch. This was not a second-choice material, but a first-rate technology honed by necessity, proving that true ingenuity often begins by valuing what everyone else throws away. The shimmering fish skin was a triumph of necessity, but the pristine white leather of palaces and temples demanded an opposite kind of care. After its bath in alum salts, that brilliantly white hide was still vulnerable, a delicate membrane that could turn to a stiff board if mishandled. To unlock its final, luxurious softness, the tower turned to the pantry. The final act was called dressing, and its recipe sounds like the start of a strange cake. Egg yolks, wheat flour, and a little oil were beaten together into a thick, golden paste. This was not food, but alchemy of a different sort. The taut hide, still damp, would be laid out on a smooth stone or wooden beam. Then, with the heels of his hands and strong, circular motions, the craftsman would work this rich emulsion deep into every inch of the skin. It was a physical, intimate process, a massage that could last for an hour or more. The air would fill with the warm, comforting scent of fresh dough and egg, a stark contrast to the acrid smells of the tannery yard. As the paste was forced into the fibers, science took over. The egg yolk, rich in phospholipids and proteins, and the oil acted as lubricants, coating the individual collagen strands so they could slide against each other freely instead of sticking tight as the hide dried. The gluten in the wheat flour added a slight binding quality, helping to fill any microscopic gaps and create a smoother surface. This dressing did more than just soften, it sealed. It formed a protective, flexible barrier over the fibers, helping to lock in the alum and guard against the leather's greatest enemy, moisture. Once the paste was fully absorbed, the leather was gently stretched and dried under tension. What emerged was a transformation of touch. The once slightly crisp, chalky hide became unbelievably supple, with a dense, cool drape like heavy silk. It could be folded without cracking, and it rustled with a soft, papery whisper. This was the material ready for the gilder's gold leaf or the scribe's careful stitching. To witness a modern artisan recreate this step is to see patience made physical, their hands moving with a rhythmic, knowing pressure. turning a simple mixture of kitchen staples into the final defense for a leather meant to last 1,000 years. In that quiet, meticulous act, preservation became an art of tenderness. That tender touch with egg and flour produced a leather of delicate luxury, but the wheels of industry demanded a material of unyielding strength. For that, tanners across the sun-drenched hills of the Mediterranean turned to a different tree, the mighty sweet chestnut. In the dense, managed forests of Italy, Spain, and southern France, the chestnut was not just a source of food, it was the backbone of heavy industry. Its wood and bark are extraordinarily rich in a specific type of tannin that produces a leather of legendary durability. The process mirrored other forms of bark tanning, but the character of the final product was distinct. Harvesters would coppice the trees, cutting them back to stumps so they would send up dense, straight shoots perfect for harvesting. The bark from these young shoots was stripped, dried, and then ground into a coarse powder between heavy millstones. This powder was then layered with hides in deep pits, creating that familiar organic sandwich, and flooded with water. The chestnut tannins worked with a particular intensity. They penetrated the hides deeply and rapidly, creating a leather that was exceptionally firm, almost rigid and resistant to wear and tear. It also imparted a very dark, warm brown color, much darker than the pale brown of oak-tanned leather. This was not a material for gloves or fine bookbinding. This was the leather of brute force application. It was cut into thick soles for the boots of soldiers and laborers. It was fashioned into the tough, flexible harnesses that connected teams of oxen to plows and wagons. Most importantly, during the Industrial Revolution, chestnut-tanned leather became the vital material for drive belts and transmission belting in factories. These long, continuous loops transferred power from steam engines to rows of clattering machinery, and they had to withstand immense tension, friction, and heat without stretching or snapping. The economic ecosystem around it was vast. Entire communities thrived on the systematic coppicing of chestnut groves, a sustainable practice that provided a perpetual harvest for the tanneries. The trade in chestnut tannin extract became a major commodity, shipped from Mediterranean ports to tanneries across Europe and the Americas. To walk through an old chestnut coppice today is to see a landscape shaped by leather. The straight, multi-trunked trees rising from ancient stumps are a living monument to an era when the strength of civilization was literally belted together by the dark, enduring tannins of the chestnut tree. The dark, rigid belts of the chestnut tanneries powered a mechanical age, but in the vibrant, living heart of West Africa, tanners harnessed a different kind of fermenting energy. The method is palm wine tanning, a technique whispered through generations, its details preserved more in practice than in parchment. It begins with the tapping of a raffia or oil palm tree. A skilled tapper makes a careful incision in the flower bud, and the sweet, clear sap, called ensafufuo or simply palm wine, begins to flow into a gourd. This fresh sap is a sugary delight, but left to sit in the tropical heat, it undergoes a rapid, wild transformation. Within hours, natural yeasts begin their work, converting the sugars into alcohol. Within a day, the fermentation progresses further, and the alcohol starts to turn to vinegar. It is in this sharp, acidic, actively fermenting state that the palm wine becomes a tool for the tanner. A cleaned animal hide, perhaps from a goat or antelope, would be submerged in a container of this pungent, bubbling liquid. The soak could last for several days, and sometimes other local materials were added to the brew: crushed leaves from certain trees, handfuls of aromatic herbs, or powdered bark, each family or community possibly guarding their own subtle recipe. The chemistry mirrors the most ancient principles. The acetic acid in the fermenting wine acts as a gentle tanning agent, penetrating the hide's fibers and beginning the preservation process. The active fermentation itself, with its bustling population of bacteria and yeasts, may have contributed to breaking down proteins and softening the hide, much like the rice bran fermentation of Japan. The resulting leather, after being removed, washed, and meticulously worked by hand, possessed a unique character. It was typically lightweight and acquired a soft, pliable temper. Most distinctively, it was said to carry a faint, pleasant aroma, a lingering trace of the palm sap and herbs, a far cry from the harsh smells of lime or dung. This was not an industrial process, but a deeply integrated one, often carried out within the rhythms of community life. The palm wine itself was a social drink, central to ceremonies, gatherings, and libations. Its use in tanning creates a beautiful symbolic loop, where a substance that connected people to each other and to the spirit world was also used to transform the gifts of the hunt into useful, beautiful objects. The leather produced would have been for everyday items, bags, pouches, straps, and perhaps even elements of ceremonial dress, imbued with the essence of the palm. Because this knowledge was traditionally passed down orally and through demonstration rather than written in ledgers, it remains a fascinating historical mystery. Each piece of leather made this way, if we could find one preserved, would be a tangible echo of a sustainable, localized craft, where the line between a celebratory drink and a powerful preservative was deliciously and usefully blurred. That fermented palm wine connected craft to community, but high in the windswept, misty landscapes of the north, tanners found their chemistry clinging to rocks and trees. Lichen and moss tanning is a testament to the profound, intimate knowledge of local ecology possessed by ancient peoples. In the Scottish Highlands across Scandinavia, and likely in the boreal forests of North America, gatherers would carefully harvest specific species of lichen, a symbiotic organism that is part fungus and part algae. One of the most prized was Acrolchia tartaria, known commonly as cudbear or orchella weed. This lichen, along with certain tannin-rich mosses, held a secret within its crusty, grayish-green folds. The process was one of patient extraction. The gathered lichen or moss was dried, then broken into pieces and placed into a large pot of water. Unlike the boiling used for willow bark, this mixture was often brought to a gentle simmer and then allowed to steep for a long time, much like brewing a potent tea. The goal was to coax out not only the preserving tannins, but also the vibrant natural dyes locked within the organisms. A prepared sheepskin or other small hide would then be submerged in this cool, colored bath for an extended soak, sometimes for weeks. The chemistry served a dual purpose. The tannins from the lichen worked to stabilize the skin's fibers, performing a basic tanning function. Simultaneously, the rich dye compounds saturated the wool and the leather itself, staining them through and through. The colors produced were remarkable and variable, depending on the specific lichen used, the mineral content of the water, and even the age of the harvest. The bath could yield a spectrum of earthy hues. Acrolchia tartaria, when fermented with urine as a mordant to fix the color, was famous for producing a range of beautiful purples and lilacs, colors that were rare and highly valued in the ancient world. Other lichens and mosses yielded warm browns, rusty oranges, and deep olive greens. This method was likely never used for creating heavy, rigid leather for armor or belts. Its perfect application was for sheepskins, where the goal was to create a warm, durable, and beautifully colored fleece on hide for rugs, bedding, or clothing. The tanner here was also a dyer, and the knowledge required was immense. It meant understanding which rocky outcrops or tree branches hosted the right species, knowing the best season to harvest for maximum potency, and recognizing how to combine the bath with other methods, perhaps a follow-up smoke treatment to ensure full preservation. To see a historic example is to witness a landscape captured in fiber. The wool dyed a soft heather purple, and the leather backing stained a complementary earthy brown. Speak of peat bogs, granite cliffs, and damp, mossy forests. It was a craft born from looking closely at the quiet, slow-growing life underfoot and seeing within it the recipe for both color and resilience. The subtle purples of lichen dye speak of a gentle chemistry, but another plant offered a cleansing touch that may have hidden a deeper purpose. Soapwort, with its clusters of delicate pink flowers, is a humble plant with a powerful secret. Its leaves and roots contain natural chemicals called saponins, which, when crushed and mixed with water, produce a rich, frothy lather. For centuries across Europe and Asia, soapwort was the gentle detergent of choice, used to wash delicate fabrics, fine woolens, and even human hair. But what about a raw animal hide, still greasy and stiff from the curing process? This is where history offers a tantalizing hint. We have no definitive recipe for soapwort tanning, but we do know it was a staple in the tanner's world for washing hides at various stages. The question is, did this simple wash ever cross the line into preservation? The theory rests on soapwort's unique action. Unlike harsh modern soaps, its saponins are mild surfactants that lift away grease and dirt without being overly alkaline. A tanner might have given a hide a prolonged, thorough wash in a strong soapwort decoction to prepare it for a true tanning bath. In that lengthy soak, two things could have happened. First, the cleaning action would have been exceptionally thorough, opening up the hide's fibers more than plain water could. Second, and more speculatively, some of the saponins themselves might have bonded lightly with the collagen, providing a faint stabilizing effect, a pre-tanning of sorts. The result would not be a durable, weatherproof leather like oak-tanned hide. At best, it might have produced a very soft, supple, but highly perishable material, perhaps suitable for a temporary pouch or an inner lining. To test this fringe theory, modern experimental archaeologists have taken on the challenge. They harvest the plant with its pretty blooms, boil the roots to create a soapy broth, and submerge a small piece of scraped deerskin for days or weeks. The process is one of patient observation, checking for changes in texture, smell, and resistance to decay compared to a hide washed only in water. Does the soapwort-treated skin dry softer? Does it resist becoming stiff and board-like for a little longer? The answers are subtle, living in the realm of maybe. This places soapwort firmly on the fascinating border between craft and chemistry, between cleaning and creating. It reminds us that in the ancient workshop, the boundaries between processes were fluid. A step taken for one practical reason might have quietly, accidentally achieved another. The pink flowers of the soapwort plant, then, symbolize not a proven method but a beautiful possibility, a reminder that the full story of leather is still being washed clean, revealing its secrets one gentle, speculative lather at a time. Soapwort's gentle lather represents one edge of the craft, but at the other extreme lies a method of pure, unadulterated saturation. Before a hide could be called leather, it often had to endure a final, greasy baptism. This is fat tanning, a process distinct from the oxidation of fish oils in chamois making. Here, the goal was not to create polymers, but to physically stuff the fibers with pure, rendered animal fat to force them apart and lock in suppleness. The source material was anything rich and greasy, bare fat prized for its consistency, deer tallow, or the thick, nutritious marrow slowly roasted from the long bones of a recent kill. This marrow was rendered down over a low fire until it became a clear, liquid gold. A hide, perhaps already tanned by smoke or bark but still too stiff for its intended purpose, would be laid out. The warm, liquid fat was then meticulously rubbed and worked into every square inch using smooth stones, bone tools, or simply the heel of the hand. This was not a gentle application, it was a forceful impregnation, driving the fat deep into the very core of the leather's structure. Think of the collagen fibers as a dense, dry sponge. The liquid fat is pushed into every tiny cavity, coating each individual strand. This coating prevents the fibers from bonding tightly together as the leather dries and flexes, which is what causes stiffness and cracking. The fat also creates a hydrophobic barrier, making the leather highly water-resistant. For items like winter moccasins, hunting pouches, or saddle skirts that faced constant moisture and flexing, this final fat treatment was the difference between a serviceable item and a supremely durable one. The process also played a crucial role in the creation of rawhide, which is not tanned at all but merely dried. rawhide is famously hard and brittle. By working large amounts of warm fat into rawhide while it was still slightly damp, a craftsman could transform it into a material that was tough yet could be shaped and would remain somewhat flexible, perfect for certain types of lashings, drum heads, or protective cases. The smell of a workshop performing this task would have been rich and heavy, the scent of roasting marrow and warm animal fat clinging to the air and the artisan's hands. It was the last visceral step in a long chain of transformation, where the body of one animal gave its fat to ensure the skin of another could endure for years to come. That final, visceral step of working in warm fat completes a journey that began with a raw hide. But our list of 25 methods must end not with a finality, but with a question, a modern mystery that echoes ancient ingenuity. The 25th method is not found in any archaeological record, yet it feels like a ghost from the past. It is kombucha tanning, or more precisely, the creation of a leather-like material from the SCOBY, the symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast that ferments sweet tea into the tangy drink kombucha. In kitchens and biolabs today, experimenters are performing a new kind of alchemy. They brew a batch of sweetened tea, introduce a SCOBY, and then wait. Over weeks, the culture does something remarkable. It feeds on the sugar and caffeine, and as a byproduct, it excretes a thick, rubbery mat of pure bacterial cellulose at the surface of the liquid. This mat grows layer by microscopic layer until it can be lifted out, washed, and dried. The transformation is startling. The wet, gelatinous sheet becomes a tough, flexible, translucent material. When treated with natural oils or gentle tannins, it darkens and gains a texture eerily reminiscent of thin, delicate leather. It can be cut, stitched, and molded. This is not tanning an animal skin at all. It is growing a material from scratch. So why include it in a list of ancient methods? Because it serves as a profound thought experiment. We know ancient cultures across the world mastered fermentation for food, drink, and preservation, from the palm wine of West Africa to the rice bran of Japan. They understood the transformative power of bacterial and yeast cultures. Is it so far-fetched to wonder if, at some point, a forgotten artisan noticed a thick, rubbery mat forming on the surface of a forgotten fermented brew and, driven by curiosity, fished it out? What if they dried it, felt its toughness, and experimented? There is no evidence, yet the possibility tantalizes. It suggests that the fundamental principles of working with biology, rather than fighting it, have always been at the heart of material science. Today, this modern experiment points directly to the future. Companies and designers are now seriously developing SCOBY-based bio-leather as a sustainable alternative to animal and plastic-based materials. It requires minimal resources, grows in a vat, and is fully biodegradable. To see a time lapse of a SCOBY mat growing is to watch leather being born from a silent, microbial world. It brings our journey full circle, from the hunter using a deer's brain to preserve its skin, to the scientist cultivating a vat of tea to grow a new kind of hide. Both represent a deep dialogue with nature, a search for resilience not through domination but through understanding. The 25 methods are not just a list of recipes, they are a map of human curiosity, written not on parchment, but in the very fiber of the materials that built our world. From the brain of the animal to the bark of the forest, from the fermenting rice bran of the samurai to the pungent dung pits of medieval cities, these 25 methods are a testament to a single, powerful truth. Humanity did not invent leather from a single recipe, but discovered it 1,000 times over in 1,000 different places, using whatever the local world provided. This was chemistry before laboratories, material science born from sheer necessity and deep observation. Each method was a perfect adaptation, a dialogue between people and their environment. The icy Arctic coast gave rise to fish skin leather, the dense oak forests of Europe produced leather for armor, and the dry outbacks of Australia yielded mimosa tanned shields and water bags. There was no one right way, only the right way for here and now. Leather was never just a material. It was the flexible armor that protected a knight, the silent moccasin that tracked game, the pristine vellum that preserved sacred words, and the sturdy belt that drove the machines of the Industrial Revolution. It sat at the crossroads of survival, art, and technology. In the hands of a tanner, the perishable skin of an animal became a durable record of human ingenuity, a physical memory of the landscape and the culture that shaped it. So we leave you with this question: after this journey through smoke and salt, which of these 25 ancient methods surprised you the most? Was it the lost chrome tanning of ancient China, the elegant use of myrobalan in India, or the sheer pragmatism of the urine tax? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden alchemy of the past, be sure to subscribe. We are just getting started on unraveling the world's historical mysteries. The next time you see a master leatherworker bending a piece of vegetable tanned hide over a wooden form, or carefully stitching a delicate repair, remember you are witnessing a lineage that stretches back over 5,000 years. In their hands, the ancient conversation between human creativity and the raw gifts of the natural world continues, one careful, deliberate